Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. Before we get to the details in the technical report for the power plant options for Central Virginia, I want to take about 15 minutes to discuss the environmental factors that will help shape our decisions. This map represents the demographic and geographic regions of Virginia. Central Virginia is shown in light blue. Richmond is the capital of the Commonwealth and is one of its 38 independent cities. The state is divided into 95 counties, of which Chesterfield is the fifth most populated and Henrico is the sixth. They wrap around the city of Richmond, creating power demands for 1.3 million residents, as well as local businesses and industry. This map is the geologic regions of Virginia. Central Virginia is part of the Piedmont and is the largest geologic region of the state, connecting Washington, D.C. to the north to North Carolina in the south. The James River is the most important watershed in the region, and you can see from this map that much of the eastern portion of the Piedmont is just above sea level, which is shown in green. The fall line of the James River runs right through the city of Richmond, and the first coal mine in North America was in Chesterfield County. The Blue Ridge Mountains are the western boundary of the Piedmont, with the coastal plain on the east, and they both help shape Central Virginia's climate. Weather is sort of short term. It's hourly, daily, monthly. It's the atmospheric conditions that you measure: temperature, precipitation, humidity, barometric pressure, wind, cloudiness. It's a very small and specific measurement. Climate is the average weather in a larger, more general given area over a longer period of time. It's typically years and decades. Think of it this way. Any town can have a rainy day. That's weather. Richmond has over 150 rainy days each year. That's climate. Global warming is a significant factor in climate change, but they aren't interchangeable terms, so I'm going to go a little bit more in depth. Global warming is the long-term trend of increasing average global temperatures, either by natural forcings or by anthropogenic forcings. Don't worry, I'll explain those in a minute. Climate change is a change in the global or regional climate patterns, in particular, a change apparent from the mid to late 20th century onwards. Longer and more widespread droughts, more frequent wildfires, more frequent and stronger storms, and increased ocean acidification are just some of the symptoms of climate change. So again, global warming is a very specific term, and it's narrowly defined in terms of the degree or intensity of heat present. And maybe that's more easily understood than the more complex ensemble of phenomena of climate change. Maybe it's helpful to think of it this way. You can tell if you have a fever if you have a thermometer and you take your temperature. But when you have a fever, you may also be sweaty or have chills or be sore aching, have a headache. You might be really tired. There are a whole lot of ways that a fever can present itself. The energy budget is simple. Incoming solar radiation and outgoing surface heat radiation. If the incoming energy is greater than the outgoing energy, the planet gets warmer. If outgoing is greater than incoming, the planet gets cool. So those forcing factors, it's actually pretty simple. They sound like just what they are. Any phenomenon that pushes or drives climate change. They can be natural or anthropogenic, and their effect is on the Earth's atmosphere, its land, ocean, cryosphere. Oh, another vocabulary term. Those are the frozen parts of land and water. Think about permafrost and glaciers. So I've organized these boxes of natural causes of climate change into roughly an order that goes from the shortest term to the longest and from the greatest impact to the least. So according to NASA, about 29% of the solar energy that arrives at the top of the atmosphere is reflected right back into space by the clouds, atmospheric particles, or bright ground surfaces like sea, ice, and snow. And roughly 71% of the total incoming energy is absorbed by the Earth system. So here in the Richmond area, we get about 210 sunny days a year and some kind of precipitation on just over 100. So pop quiz, is that weather or climate? Well, let's talk a little bit about albedo. For example, ocean surfaces and rainforests have low albedos, which means that they reflect only a small portion of the sun's energy. Deserts, ice, and clouds, however, they have high albedos. They reflect a large portion of the sun's energy. So the high albedo of ice helps to insulate the polar oceans from solar radiation. Then we get to greenhouse gases. It's a massive box. Greenhouse gases are mainly carbon dioxide, but also water vapor and methane. They're pretty significant too. They're called greenhouse gases because they act just like the glass on a greenhouse. They're transparent, yet they're able to keep heat in. Aerosols are airborne particles that reflect, like dust or ice crystals, or absorb, like soot. Volcanic eruptions get their own box because they have gases that they emit during an eruption, which absorb radiation, but the ash is reflective and creates a cooling effect. So they kind of go both ways. And Milankovitch cycles take thousands upon thousands of years. Basically, sometimes the Earth is a little bit closer to the sun in its orbit, and sometimes it's a little bit further away. Anthropogenic just means man-made. Think anthro like philanthropy and anthropology, and genic like genesis or generator. Mostly it just boils down to the fact that humans do things that are throwing the balance of the radiation in, radiation out equation out of whack. We do some things that directly release heat, but that's not the major contributor to global warming that is forcing the climate change. In the span of a century or two, we will burn through most of the hydrocarbon deposits that took millions and millions of years to form. In the process of improving our standard of living, we're also unleashing gigatons of carbon dioxide and extra water vapor and methane and gases that act like rolled up windows in a car in the middle of a parking lot on a sunny summer day. The incoming wavelengths of radiation have no trouble passing through the glass, but the outgoing wavelengths are different and they can't get through. There's no escape, so they're trapped and more and more and more heat accumulates. Remember when I said about 29% of incoming solar radiation is bounced back by reflecting off of ice and snow? Well, we're losing surface albedo because higher temperatures are melting the cryosphere. Can you picture this loop? Less ice and more heat, which makes less ice, which makes more heat. Less ice, more heat. Anyway, Joni Mitchell was rather prescient. We're paving paradise to put up a parking lot. Dark surfaces like asphalt absorb heat. Many modern cities and suburbs have very little tree cover to provide shade. Did you know that Richmond is actually it's ranked pretty poorly on an urban heat island list? Anyway, even itty-bitty microscopic particulate dark surfaces can change the climate. Soot absorbs and smoke reflects. Obviously, there's soot and smoke in the nature, but humans rely on combustion and create fires that add tons more to the air than would naturally occur. And even though smoke technically cools the air, don't forget that whatever is burned up to make the smoke releases gases and carbon into the atmosphere. So more smoke is not a cure for carbon change. Ozone is just 3 little oxygen atoms bonded together, which doesn't seem like a big deal when what we breathe is 2 atoms of oxygen, but loss of stratospheric ozone is a bummer because more UV radiation can penetrate and reach the surface of the Earth where more living things are, and ground level ozone is basically toxic. Even if it doesn't directly impact global warming, it does adversely affect ecosystems, especially plants. So clearly, the climate has been changing over the millions and millions and millions, billions of years. There may be some discussion about whether snowball Earth period or the Anthropocene, but basically there is enough evidence that scientists overwhelmingly agree that significant events have happened then and are happening now. So let's talk about Virginia's climate. Virginia has never been covered by glaciers, but it has been affected by ice ages and the times in between. When the glaciers were advancing from the north, so much water was trapped in them, frozen form, that the sea level dropped 400 feet. Virginia Beach would have been about 40 to 75 miles from the ocean. During the most recent ice age, on average, only 25 inches of rain fell annually. For thousands of years, the climate here was colder and drier. Not quite like the tundra, scientists have collected pollen from sediments that accumulated in the various lakes and bogs during the ice ages and found spruce and fir pollen, which are cold climate trees here in Virginia, as well as the pollen of warm species trees such as oak and hickory. During the warmer periods between the ice ages, the sea level was up 15 feet higher than it is today, meaning Richmond was practically on the coast. So the winds carried more moisture, making central Virginia warmer and wetter, and rainfall and temperatures and soil composition are what define biomes. Richmond had transformed into a temperate climate that we know today. So the climate never stops changing. It's just that now it is changing so much faster. Climate change has gradually impacted the United States for more than the past 100 years, but perhaps it's just been too subtle for Americans to notice. As these maps show, the frequency and severity of climate-caused disasters is becoming pretty obvious within a single lifetime, so that multiple generations are experiencing the adverse consequences. As you can see, not all of the top 6 types of catastrophe usually impact each area of the continental U.S., but Virginia is susceptible to all 6 over time, even wildfires, as more than 1,000 are reported annually. As you can see, temperatures have been and will continue to rise. The only uncertainty is how much. It might be helpful to remind everyone about the difference between weather and climate. Despite the 60s through the 80s of sort of being cool, the overall trend is hotter, and that's not just nostalgia. Again, as you can see, Central Virginia is going to keep heating up. The only uncertainty is how much. If it were somehow possible to immediately stop all the emissions and to fortify our carbon sinks, by planting forests, for example, or sequestering large quantities of carbon dioxide underground, the temperature would still go up a little bit. That's the blue trend line. If we keep going like we are, with no changes whatsoever, we get the red line scenario. While there is some uncertainty, I can tell you what I'm absolutely positive about. I learned about climate change in high school and college, and everything that was predicted way back then in the 80s and 90s is absolutely coming true now. The uncertainty is not really around what will happen anymore. It's more of, will humanity take the red or the blue? This is pretty blurry, but it's showing that as winters become warmer and summers become hotter, the range for disease vectors like ticks and mosquitoes expands. Habitat for other animals and plants declines and biodiversity suffers. Higher air temperatures also increase drought in some places and rainfall in others, and it'll definitely contribute to sea level rise. The Palmer Z index measures short-term drought on a monthly scale, and long-term drought is cumulative. So basically, if you have short-term drought going on for a long time, it turns into long-term drought. On the coast and in the peninsula, sea level will rise, causing permanent flooding, but also more frequent and stronger hurricanes will cause temporary flooding and significant structural damage. Droughts in the Piedmont and Blue Ridge will damage agricultural areas and negatively impact crops. And all these negative impacts have a social and economic cost. Infrastructure and transportation will be affected by climate change. The ability of various industries, such as the military or manufacturing, agriculture, to operate and transport their goods will be negatively impacted. In addition, it may be hard to attract workers to Virginia if the environment is unhealthy. Rising sea levels will make hurricane storm surges worse and force decisions about which waterfront properties to protect and which ones to abandon. Storms are going to be more extreme, causing building damage. Flood damage costs money and impacts lives. Agricultural disruption costs money and impacts lives. Health impacts such as exacerbated asthma or allergies, heat stroke, that impacts lives and costs money. The migration of people and of wildlife impacts lives and costs money. Recent studies have even found that violence increases as temperature increases. It's tricky to be a good public servant. If you don't give the people what they want, you might not be in office long. Personal transportation is a massive contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Certainly Virginians are like any other Americans. We love our cars and trucks, but parking and traffic are a hassle that you can capitalize on. Instead of building more roads, which are expensive and don't solve the problem, invest in high-speed rail and more city buses. Don't add more parking. Change codes for zoning and construction to allow for multifamily homes and environmentally efficient building practices such as tighter insulation and gray water systems. I never understood why we filled our toilets with drinking water anyway. Plant more trees and preserve more green space. Property values don't need much help right now, but studies indicate that proximity to parks and natural areas improves physical and mental health. Better health can save public resources. Being green sometimes is the more expensive option up front, but perhaps Pigouvian taxes could help. For example, recycled printer paper is 3 times as expensive as regular paper. Why not charge a tax that equalizes them? And finally, we can make solutions to change our personal habits. We can reduce transportation. We can drive less. We can make our house smaller. We can live with better temperatures. And we can eat less. 14.5% of global greenhouse emissions come from livestock. There are a lot of things we can do. Even though this is a little bit depressing, we have solutions.